lot of people trickling in. So welcome to the New York Information Security Meetup / the Cyber Guild. It's just 1 minute past 2 o'clock on December 22nd. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Dan Lohrmann, who's a internationally recognized cybersecurity leader, technologist, and keynote speaker and author. So welcome to the group. I appreciate you taking the time from your busy day, and I know it's definitely busy. It's coming to the holiday season and so on. So this is a great opportunity to talk shop, just before the holidays. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, David. It's great to be with you all. Appreciate the invitation.
So you just published the 21 security predictions for 2021.
Yep.
So then why are you qualified to predict, the almost impossible to predict, how are things going to turn out in 2021?
Yeah. So first of all, I will say I'm not qualified in and of itself to do my predictions, because what I do, and I've been doing this for about 7 years now. I've actually been participating since when I was CISO for the state of Michigan. I started getting asking questions about predictions probably 15 years ago. So I've been, every year this comes up, right? But what I started doing in about 2014 was chronicling all the reports that the different vendors have put together. So these aren't my predictions. These are actually the reports that are put out by the FireEyes, the Trend Micros, all the different vendors out there, Symantec, AT&T, and what I found, David, is every year these vendors, some people just put together 10 predictions, throw it into a blog, and send it out. Others do a lot more than that. I mean, like the likes of FireEye and Trend Micro, the top two, and I have my own kind of algorithm to rank them. It's kind of fun every year. And then I give some awards for like the scariest, the most likely, the least likely, different things like that. But these vendors put a lot of time and money into these reports. I mean, to the point of it's not just like, making stuff up and then just saying the cloud will have breaches again this year kind of thing. I mean, they really do put a lot of research money and time into these and really connect the dots. Obviously, and I started the report out this year, David. I'll say, everyone kind of blew it last year, right? No one predicted COVID, and so I had to start out right out of the gate with that. Is that everyone was saying, when I was talking to a bunch of security executives back in October and November, they're like, Dan, how can you even do it this year? Because we totally screwed up last year, and no one predicted COVID and the pandemic and the working from home thing. But the reality is more people are back than ever. The vendors are in. I mean, it's every year. It seems like it grows every year. So I'm basically chronicling what everybody else is doing and trying to put them all in one place. So for easy reference, easy access, and, they're all available. People can dive into the reports.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's amazing about this, as you mentioned, no one predicted that. And, almost emphasizes the need for business continuity planning, BCP, right? Where not just on the business side, nobody predicted, zero revenue for, a couple of months, but also the ability to work remotely within, basically the entire company within, a couple of weeks, which is unheard of, throughout history. So, that definitely threw off like some of the predictions. So, you're looking at your, and we'll jump into, I want to also kind of like dive a little bit into your background, because you have like really fascinating track record and background. You've done a lot of things. You have, you have the credentials and, the academic credentials, the background and so on. We'll dive into that in a second, but I would love to, from the top, 21 or whatever the number is, which ones do you see are kind of the most paramount? That that if these happen, companies should prepare for that. What would you see as like kind of the top three? If someone had to didn't have the time to read the whole report and just wanted to, hey, give me the net. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, clearly, probably the three top things. One of the things I do, David, is I look at repetition of vendors. So if they're all predicting the same thing, there's a good likelihood it's going to happen. And just one more quick thing about 2020. Everybody predicted election issues, election security issues. And so they did get that one right. The election security was a big deal. And, a lot of headlines and a lot of talk about elections. So, there were a lot of things they did get right about last year. When we talked about 2020, nobody did predict COVID. But with COVID, I think the number one thing, the working from home thing is just going crazy. And I think more and more people predicting breaches as a result of that kind of the other shoe's going to drop. Yes, a lot of people did the working from home thing very well, but like Trend Micro came out and said it's going to be the new, the home network is going to be the new headquarters, if you will, for the dark web. It's going to be like, all kinds of different predictions around home networks, home challenges related to people using their home computers, and we haven't really even seen all of the ramifications of the data breaches. They're going to come out of that. Clearly, want to mention also the SolarWinds headlines that we've all been reading for the last week plus. Most of these reports came out before SolarWinds and before the FireEye data breach. So that's going to also contribute. Everyone's saying more data breaches. Clearly, that's a big trend. But, data breaches around working from home, issues around working from home. How do people get their arms around, the data, controlling the data, because everyone went so rapidly to moving to working from home. So that would be one big category that almost every vendor talks about. Another would be ransomware. Ransomware, clearly we had another huge year in ransomware. I call 2019 the year ransomware attacked state and local governments, because so many state and local governments were just decimated by ransomware. It got even worse in 2020. People are saying it's going to even get worse in 21. More targeted ransomware, higher ransoms. The numbers are going way up. And then, as I'm sure you know, and your listeners, probably many of them are aware, it's changing too. So a lot of the bad guys are not only are they encrypting your data and bringing down your operations and your network and saying pay the ransom to get it back, but they're oftentimes stealing the data before they do that. So, more and more combinations of different types of attacks, ransomware with DDoS, ransomware in hospitals. People already died. That was predicted last year. Somebody's going to die because of a malware attack or ransomware. I guess people say that someone died in Germany because of a malware attack. So that supposedly has already happened. I don't know all the nitty-gritty details about that, but there's more predictions about it's going to be not just about money and Bitcoin. It's going to also be more related to operational impacts, bringing down, hopefully not the electric grid, but bringing down critical infrastructure because of these attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's the CISO said the hackers, were demonstrated patience, operational security, complex tradecraft in these intrusions, specifically around kind of the latest, the latest breach that happened. It doesn't sound to me like, and the scary piece is again that it's almost like someone is preparing. And I know Morgan Wright that just viewed basically mentioned that it's part of IPB, intelligence preparation in the battlefield, right? So it's collection of vulnerability data before stockpiling for future use. What are your thoughts about that? Should we all prepare our provisions and bunkers ready, or what?
Well, some people are going that direction. I'm hopeful. One thing you get to know about me, David, you and I don't know each other that well, but I am an optimist. I don't think you can be in cybersecurity for long term if you're not an optimist. I'm hoping this is a comeback year where, businesses are coming back, the vaccine works and travel gets back to normal. And maybe the second half of the year, probably not first half, right? I certainly, agree. We talk about ransomware. The biggest thing you can do is have good data backups, have tested backups, have good business process resumption protocols, and do tabletop exercise. The exercise is, and certainly make sure that everything's tested, because that's the number one thing that that the bad guys do get in, and they do get hold your company ransom and encrypt all your data, that you can restore and then you can go back to a known good state is the number one way really you can defend against ransomware. I mean, obviously there's lots of proactive steps you can take to block things, but employees click on links, things happen, and so people have been hit that I thought were really protected. I actually know companies here in Michigan that said, big companies that they were ready, that had all that, they had all the data backups, they had everything ready to go, and then they were hit. And it turns out they really weren't as ready as they thought they were. So certainly, making sure your business process, resumption, backups, tested backups with it air gapped, all that's important. I will mention a couple of the other big. I have a list right at the beginning of the blog we talked about. A lot of talk about 5G vulnerabilities. A lot of vendors have talked about that. There's a lot of talk about new APT threats, advanced persistent threats, widely available in criminal networks. And basically, you can go online. The dark web will allow criminals to buy access into sensitive corporate networks. So basically, buy the credentials. Some people are predicting this will be the year the password dies. I'm not so sure about that, but really going towards much more multi-factor authentication.
It seems like for the 21st 21 years in a row, right? the year the password died.
Well, I think multi-factor authentication will start to really take off. I do believe that more and more people are going to MFA. Still not where we need to be, but certainly enterprises are seeing the value in getting rid of passwords. And unfortunately, David, it's still. I think I just saw a study. Even for free two-factor authentication for like your Facebook, your Gmail, for social media sites like different websites. Only still 25% of people use multi-factor authentication. Most people are still just using username and password. So we have a long way to go around user education about multi-factor authentication, but a lot of people are predicting that this could be a turning point year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's amazing, that those statistics are, mind-boggling, right? The fact that these are, available. MFA is typically, you can do it for free. Yep. And it's available to you, text message or otherwise. And still, people are not using it, or reusing simple password like password 123. Yeah. So coming back to the current events with SolarWinds, let's kind of dissect that a little bit. So this slogan was everybody's IT.
Yep.
So let me just let that sink in for a second. And now, everybody's IT is being is being compromised. Specifically, the kind of the update tool. Have company reach out to you in terms of like, hey, what do we do? Whether you got hacked specifically with SolarWinds or not, your supply chain for sure has been hacked. Because it's so prolific, right? What was your recommendation to some of these organizations to reach out to you, and what can they do to right now with the most amount of impact, with the least amount of obviously expenditure and heavy lifting involved, to mitigate against something like that?
Sure. No, the numbers are astounding. Something like over 400 of the 500 Fortune 500 companies, were impacted, supposedly, if you believe some of the numbers that are coming out. I think there's been really good guidance given by the federal government, CISO. Of course, they were hit as well. So, they had to report back in their numbers, and a lot of them missed their deadlines of the government agencies. But CISA, FBI have provided some really good guidance. So I would certainly look at some of those U.S. CERT guidance documents, kind of walk you through step by step what you can do to, first of all, find out, were you impacted? Do you have the DLLs that, did this affect you and your companies or your government? I think most companies are already beyond that now. I think the big challenge we've had, David, is the ones that were hit, what else happened going sideways? The original guidance was just shut it down, but you may need to use your SolarWinds to know what else is happening on your networks and things. So I think for some people, they're struggling with some of the guidance. But yes, a lot of my contacts, a lot of the people have reached out. The guidance we've been giving, and there are several great blogs out there we can point to at CISA and FBI and others send you those links, and that really just SolarWinds guidance. You can Google it. There's a number of really, but I'd go FBI, U.S. CERT, CISA, which is Department of Homeland Security, the cybersecurity agency, providing really good step-by-step ways to check. Certainly working with those partners. I mean, most of these partners are reaching out as well. SolarWinds themselves, Microsoft, a number of the others that have been impacted by this have also been reaching out. So I think clearly there's a lot of people scrambling. I know it's hit a lot of state and local governments as well, which I do a lot in the public sector. A lot of federal agencies were impacted. So it's pretty broad. And I think, there's going to be other shoes that are going to drop as we head into 2021. All the bad news is not out yet.
Yeah, and again, I think, specifically Morgan Wright mentioned that it's like an atom bomb basically went off, the cyber atom bomb, but, we don't see it as much because it's a, kind of the impact is yet to be seen, as you mentioned. So, let's say I'm a, IT security, responsible security at a SMB or medium-sized business here in the US. And I go in and I read your top 21 security predictions. You already touched upon a few things, but, if I don't want to be the next victim, right? And, it's hard for me to figure out what do I do next, because there are just so many different, items here that I can potentially hit upon. Like MFA, almost like the simple stuff. But then, what would you do if you had, limited resources, limited amount of money, especially now when you have to struggle on the business side of the house? What would you take care of first if you were kind of the owner for security in some of these businesses, coming into the next year?
Great question. So I think it really, good lawyer answer. It depends, right? It depends. But no, the first thing I would say is, where are you at right now? So, I mean, you got to know your current state. I mean, have you done a recent risk assessment? That's where I would start by asking somebody like, what audit findings do you know about? The auditors have certainly been around usually. But what risk assessment tools have you used to really know where you're at? Do you have updated patches? How do you patch vulnerabilities? Depending on where you're at in that cycle, assuming you have most of those in place, I think what you've really got to do, one thing that came across all of these reports is the complexity is killing people. It's almost too much. Many organizations have so many tools and they're not even using the ones that they have. So, really kind of right size your whole approach around, after you have a risk assessment and where your crown jewels are, where your data is, how are you protecting that? There's a lot of, in the reports, there's a lot of really great advice. Forrester and Gartner have two really good reports, which by the way, were free. Normally they're lower in the list because they charge so much for their information. They're giving a lot more away this year. So some really good information from Forrester and Gartner this year. I would call that out. Which kind of walk you through, where are you at? Where you're at with multi-factor? Where are you at with identity management? Where are you at with the cloud? More and more, another big shift I didn't mention, was the third kind of theme, David, was more and more data is going into the cloud. And a lot of people, the kind of line I hear from a lot of small, mid-sized businesses is, I can't do security as well as Amazon. I can't do security as well as Google. I can't do security as well as Microsoft. So we'll just stick it in an Amazon cloud, and that's great, maybe. But you still have a lot of responsibility associated with that, and you're still configuring those servers. You're still, your sysadmin still,
absolutely, Dan. Yeah, it's the share, you're 100% correct. It's a shared responsibility model, right?
Correct.
You upload information to Amazon, or Google Cloud or Azure or whatever. You still are, the shared responsibility, and they have this table which shows exactly, specifically where does the responsibility starts and ends. And I think that's, you absolutely pinpoint one of the major misconceptions, that you upload your information to the cloud and you're secure. How many S3 buckets, misconfigured S3 buckets have been exposed with millions of records just because of what you just mentioned. And sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I don't do a monologue here, so I want to make this two ways. So I'm with you. I think knowing where your data is, great if you've got partners in the cloud. I think SASE is a hot term. which is kind of the new CASB, if you will, Cloud Access Security Broker, going to the SASE cloud model, SASE, that is. I think most people know that. But, being able to look at, how are you keeping track of your data coming in and out of the cloud, who's doing what, what's happening to it. I think, you really start out with, what are the basic questions for your organization, and one low-hanging fruit. I mean, I work for a security awareness training company. It's amazing how many companies still to this day in 2020 going into 2021 don't do really good security awareness for their staff. And one of the things I write a lot, I've been blogging for 15 years now and doing a lot of public articles and things, is people say, well, a lot of talk about the perfect technology or the perfect approach to fill in the blank, mobile security or whatever it might be. But it's always about people, process, and technology, David. And the biggest weakness is often in the people. And so we always got to be updating and upgrading our training with our staff and helping them understand, not just with what, a lot of people say, well, Dan, we did that, or we did that when they were a new employee, or we did that, 5 years ago. But like I say to them, David, how many of you have the same smartphone that you had 5 years ago? How many of you have the same, maybe you do have the same laptop. Actually, my laptop is about 5 years old. But, the point is we always are upgrading. We're getting the latest iPhone, the latest Android device, or maybe every 2 or 3 years. We're not sticking with the same iPhone you had, the iPhone 1, and say, well, yeah, it's all the same 15 years ago. No, I mean, we're constantly teaching people things they don't already know. So I think one of the things you can certainly look at as a culture issue in your company or your government is, how are you training your people? Are you making it engaging? Are you interacting with them? Do they understand what their responsibilities are? Do they understand what the policies are? And are they actually following those? Are they, at a very basic level? I don't want to sound like a commercial message here, but our company is about brief, frequent, focused messaging. Brief, frequent, focus. So constantly teaching people things they don't know in an engaging, interactive way that's gamified. But staff always need to be upgrading, because the bad guys are always trying to get around whatever defenses you're putting up. And so you got to constantly be keeping them up to date with the latest attack trends.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can't expect a, security awareness that was, great in 2015, to be the same if it hasn't changed in 5 to 10 years, because some of these videos are archaic.
Correct.
In terms of what they present. So I like the fact that you are, harping on the fact that we have to change. Everything is changing. Technology is changing. The delivery methods changing. And even now, the work from home thing is something that's new to a lot of people. So that's great. So from that perspective, I guess, how many companies today do you feel actually follow that and provide sufficient security awareness outside of the enrollment, onboarding process? And then outside of, you work in a large company, you have that, annual, biannual training when you click through it, while you're like, while you're watching some other stuff.
That's
right?
My PowerPoint. Yeah, I get it.
You're watching some other, funny YouTube videos or people like failing in the gym. And then, and you're clicking through it, and then you're done, right? You're like, oh, the HR system says, oh, you completed the security awareness training, and then you're done. So do you feel that we are lacking in that regards? Is there any way we can make meaningful interaction and people realize that this is something they have to do, not just to, in order for them to be compliant with HR, but it's everyone's responsibility to be more secure?
Absolutely. There's no question. And to answer your question, a couple things. I always say there's leaders, followers, and laggards. And whether it's a third, I'm not sure. But if your company, if your government is doing the same thing you did 3-4 years ago, you've already failed. People have already tuned it out. You constantly need to be updating and upgrading and the messaging, and gamify it, make it interactive, make it engaging, make it relevant. Another aspect of it, David, is leading by example. I'll tell you a quick story, true story here in Michigan. I'm no longer with Michigan government, but back when I was in 2011, we rolled out a brand new security awareness training statewide. And the governor was at a cabinet meeting, true story, Governor Rick Snyder. at the time, who was former CEO of Gateway Computers, by the way. And, he kind of walked the talk. He said at the beginning of this meeting, this was not on the agenda. He said, how many of you have taken the security awareness training? Raise your hand. And nobody's hand went up. He said, well, I took the training. It was great training. I learned some stuff. I thought it was very helpful. And by the way, I'll expect every one of you to take the training. And I'm going to ask again next month. And I want every one of your direct reports to take the training. And I'm going to ask you next month, did that happen? Took him 30 seconds to say that, right? The next month they come back. Same governor says, how many of you have taken the security awareness training? All the hands go up. Well, we know only half of them have actually done it. So half of them were lying. But the ones that didn't, ran back and canceled meetings. Some people canceled meetings, got their staff in there and said, I just told the governor we all did this, so do it right now, right? So, that leading by example, a lot of times executives or top brass in companies and governments feel like they're exempt. I don't have to do, what the low front line workers have to do, right? So, leading by example is a big part of that. And actually, following through. But yeah, you need to refresh it. You need to gamify it. You need to change it up. You need to make it different. And there's a large percentage, certainly a third or more of our companies and governments that are not doing that. And that there are a lot of people that literally have nothing. Still, or they think, well, I send an email out. They call it awareness training, but it's not really. It's somebody sent out a PDF or a Word document or maybe some article or something once a year, and they check the box. Or maybe you just, like you said, click through a PowerPoint once a year, boom, done, see you next January. It's got to be year round. It's got to be engaging. It's got to be interactive. It's not hard. We're not the only company that has good training, but, it's a different model. And we have a lot of science behind what we know works. And people need to learning things they don't already know. They need to be engaged. They need to be interactive and gamified. I think there's a large percentage of our companies and governments that still aren't doing that. And that's part of it. That's one piece. There's a lot more to it as well. There's a lot of steps we can take as individuals and our families. But yeah, I think it's a big problem.
Yeah, I agree. And I think some of it needs to start in earlier than it does, even in elementary and middle school and high school for sure, because we all these, kids are becoming the next generation of workforce, reliant very heavily on technology and so on. So they need to be instilled, hey, ask additional questions before you click on something, right? So what are your thoughts about the regulatory environment now that we have a change in administration? Do you feel that we are missing some of that, or is there too much? I always, my thoughts are always with the fact that, the early days of the cars were going out, 60, 70 miles an hour, but seatbelts were not mandatory because it was lagging behind. So are we kind of the same situation where, companies are using technology, using data prolifically, and their regulatory environment is still such that it's kind of fairly laxing in regards to, breaches?
I think we're going to see more in the Biden administration. I think it's going to, and in a lot of different ways. We've got obviously the California privacy laws. We got Washington State. We got a number. New York's got privacy laws. They're all in there. It's not the same across the country. Obviously, you've got GDPR in Europe, which is different as well. Whether we're going to have a GDPR, there's been a lot of predictions. One of them in here, in the prediction report, talks about a lot of companies say, yeah, there's going to be more regulation coming. Also in areas like, autonomous vehicles. Thinking about safety, most people, if we're going to get to that level 4, level 5 autonomous, that world of, kind of Back to the Future, flying cars and all that. If that's really going to happen, we got a long way to go still. When will we get there? Will it be 25, 30, 2025, 2030? I'm not sure, but I do think that, people just are going to assume that if they're going to get into an autonomous vehicle, that it's going to be secure, that it's not going to get hacked. Same thing with more and more of the robotics. talking about delivering your Amazon things via drones. I mean, I just foresee, we're going to be seeing more regulation coming down. There's a lot of talk about self-regulation. I think it sounds good. It would be great if it worked. I certainly think in the whole privacy area, there's a strong sentiment. Again, this isn't just Dan Lohrmann saying this. Read the report. Go to the links. One thing I do with all the predictions for 2021 is this isn't me. Go to the links at Trend Micro. Go to FireEye. Go to Forrester and Gartner and read what they're saying. And these are their reports, and they're saying that largely our whole approach to privacy is not working well in the U.S. and that we've got to change. There are people who think regulation will make it worse. There are people who think regulation will make it better. I do think we're going to be seeing more regulation. Yeah,
absolutely. And I do hope a little bit that, the predictions are going to come true. The last thing I want to do is have, like and out of the blue, like the COVID thing, right? Where no one saw that coming. So I hope that some of that will actually turn out to be true. And we're not going to see something out of the left wing, like coming out that we did not predict. I almost like to have a, fairly predictable approach here. So, just coming back, and we're kind of running the top of the time allotted here, but you mentioned something that's really interesting. The fact that technology is out there and it's prolific, and companies have all those tools, right? And some of them not even utilized, and the technology stack is keep expanding, right? Without the actual, return on investment a lot of times, right? Are there any, with that said, any technologies that are coming down the pipe, in the next several years that you see, again, if you had a prediction in terms of like maybe consolidation of some of these technologies, maybe utilizing some of them more than others, and some of them are more exciting in terms of providing that security and protection and, minimizing the risk associated with running a business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one that everyone's talked about is AI, artificial intelligence. And it's interesting when you look at the connecting the dots over the last several years, David. A couple of years ago, there was a big report, it came from IBM talking all about how AI would totally revolutionize cybersecurity in the coming year. This was 2 years ago. And at the same time, ForcePoint came out with a prediction saying there will be zero real AI this year. I mean, so it's always fun. One of the things I love about reading these reports, I actually learn a ton. It's like you get disagreements, and it's like, but and part of it you have to figure in as you read this, you're learning, okay, who's saying this? Of course, IBM with Watson, right? And so everyone like Watson this and Watson that. Watson's great. I mean, I'm all for Watson, but I mean, it's just you got AI being pushed by one company, another company saying it's it's kind of fluff. Of course, they're pushing their product.
Yeah, and then I heard the term AAI, right? Artificial intelligence.
Exactly. But I think this year again, you're seeing a lot of people say, either get into the AI game or AI is going to be used against you. So, kind of basically the ability to go in and not just scan your environment and look for holes and look through vulnerabilities and run through scripts, but, creatively find holes in your systems, in your web, in your networks, in whatever you're doing online. So I do think, AI is going to be one of those. I think it's a little bit of a nebulous term. What do you mean? Is it machine learning? Is it really true artificial intelligence? There's talk about robotics. There's talk about autonomous vehicles, being game changers. There's talk about quantum computing. Funny thing is, this year's report, not so much a lot about quantum computing. I saw a lot about quantum computing last year. But interesting, the other thing I do, David, is I look back. Sometimes I go back and I read 5 years ago, and you look at, it may not be 2021, it may not be 2022, but usually most of the things that are being listed will happen within a few years. And these are trends that are coming. And so, again, it's easy to criticize these if somebody gets something wrong. But it's not just, people predicting another cyber Pearl Harbor, cyber 9/11, the whole internet's going to go down. You don't see that a whole lot of that. It tends to be more targeted information. I think one of the challenges people are really worried about, though, David, that I think people are really struggling with right now, a tension that I feel as I read this report and I do a year-end summary, is how do you stop nation states? Assuming it was Russia that did, the solar winds, assuming it was, China's attacking us, North Korea, and if they're going after our companies, what can be done? Certainly you can't protect the entire internet. You can protect your little corner of cyberspace maybe, but I think there's a lot of frustration, like what's this going to look like with the federal government helping out businesses? I think there's a lot of questions around that, especially with SolarWinds now going into 2021. What's the role of government going to be? What's the role of the private? Can a company really protect themselves? Can they, if you will, take on the Russian army? And that's it's pretty scary when you look at the list of predictions that some of the people are coming up with.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought us some excellent points. So why don't we, kind of wrap up, but maybe sprinkle a little bit of optimism. What what do you see? Yeah, what do you see changing? For the better. If you look at the past year, if we can even talk about coming to 2021, what do you see like things that are going to be improving?
No, I am an optimist. It's not, people listen to me once like, you're an optimist? What's a pessimist? But I think overall, there is a lot of good that we can think about when we look back at 2020. Almost every company and government I've spoken with this year has said, working from home has been a huge success. They've actually been able to stay productive. They're in many cases, their metrics have gone up. They've been shocked at how well their teams have communicated using technology like we're using today with this webinar. How well people have been able to, in some cases, help with that work-life balance. I think a big trend. I saw a lot last year, a ton. Everyone was talking about it. It's still a big issue out there, but the cyber talent issue, the shortages, we can't hire enough people. Now I see people hiring people from other states, other parts of the world, because they're doing remote work, right? So more and more being done online, and maybe people even working out of state or working for companies in the other part of the country or other part of the world. So I think that's all positive. I think technology and innovation has brought about so many positive changes. Look at the NASDAQ and the Dow right now at all-time highs. How can you be overly negative with that being the situation? Hopefully, all your listeners have a little piece of that stock. But the reality is there is more cybersecurity companies being launched every day. The number of new companies popping up is mind-boggling. I think there's going to have to at some point be a consolidation, but it's not coming in the near term because the numbers just keep going up. And I think a lot of people are optimistic, with the vaccine, and hopefully we're going to be coming out of this COVID-19 and hope for a better 2021, certainly in the second half of the year. So those are just some of the things I'm excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love the optimism, and I share some of that with you as well. So looking forward to hopefully having you in person when things open up in New York City in one of our, monthly events that we took a break and we're doing this virtual. So where can people find you if they want to know more about what you do today? You have a day job and, your consulting business and security awareness business, where they can find you.
Thank you for asking. So on Twitter @GovCSO, that's @GovCSO. That's my Twitter handle. LinkedIn, Dan Lohrmann, DanLohrmann. Feel free to reach out and be happy to link with people. I get literally, dozens of messages a week helping young people trying to break into the market. I love to help mentor people. I mentor people all over the world in cybersecurity. And then also from a blogging and writing, I write for CISO Magazine and Government Technology Magazine. So Lohrmann on cybersecurity. If you try to just Google Dan Lohrmann, it'll pop right up. But I blog every week, every Sunday morning. I have a new column, just love to meet new people and network. So it's great to be on your show today, David.
Absolutely, Dan. And thank you very much for the contribution to the space. Love it. Thank you all for joining today. Much appreciated. Looking forward to seeing you all the next event. And again, thank you for taking the time to join today. Much appreciated. Take
Thanks,
care.
David.
Be well, all.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.